Hello Year 5 is your first RE lesson of the term. New topic is about what Christians believe about God. So we're going to start by looking at the creation stories, initially in Christianity but also in other religions as well. So the key question for this first lesson is, what do Christians believe about God the Creator? And as well as our key question, we'll look at the learning objectives that we'll consider today. To retell the creation story in Genesis, so that Genesis, the first chapter, the first book of the Old Testament in the Bible. Then we'll look at seeing if we can discuss how God is presented in this story, so what impression we get of God through this story. And then finally, we can challenge ourselves to compare the creation stories of different religions and cultures, so we'll look at some of those shortly. Just before we look in more detail, I just want to take a moment. You might want to pause the video to consider what you believe about the beginning of life on Earth, how the Earth was created or how it came into existence. So just take a minute to think about that. Now, there are lots of different theories or beliefs. You may have heard of the scientific theory of the Big Bang. That's one popular or widely held belief or theory, but there are also different stories in different religions as well. So we're going to look firstly at the creation story in the Bible. So this is a brief summary of it here. We're going to look at it in more detail shortly, but we've got see here with the pictures we can follow. The idea here is that we follow the 7 days of creation here. On the first day, God created light and dark. On the second day, God created the sky. On the third day, God created land. On the fourth day, God created the sun, the moon and the stars. The fifth day, God created living creatures for the sky and sea. The sixth day, God created many different animals, including human beings. And finally, on the seventh day, God rested. So that was a brief summary, a storyboard, if you like, of Genesis chapters 1 and 2. But we'll look at the actual story as it is written in the Old Testament, in the Bible. So Genesis chapter 1, you notice at the start of the paragraph there is a 1 in bold. That's to show that that's the beginning of chapter 1. The other numbers that you may notice going through are the different verses within the chapter, and this is something that is found in all Bible stories, all books in the Bible. So Genesis chapter 1, the beginning of the world. In the beginning, God created the sky and the earth. The earth was empty and had no form. Darkness covered the ocean, and God's Spirit was moving over the water. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, so he divided the light from the darkness. God named the light day, and the darkness night. Evening passed, and morning came. This was the first day. Then God said, "Let there be something to divide the water in two." So God made the air to divide the water in two. Some of the water was above the air, and some of the water was below it. God named the air sky. Evening passed, and morning came. This was the second day. Then God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered together so the dry land will appear." And it happened. God named the dry land earth. He named the water that was gathered together seas. God saw that this was good. Then God said, "Let the earth produce plants. Some plants will make grain for seeds, others will make fruit with seeds in it." And it happened. The earth produced plants. Some plants had grain for seeds. The trees made fruit with seeds in it. Each seed grew its own kind of plant. God saw that all this was good. Evening passed and morning came. This was the third day. Then God said, "Let there be light in the sky to separate day from night. This light will be used for signs, seasons, days and years. It will be in the sky to give light to the earth." And it happened. So God made the two large lights. He made the bright light to rule the day. He made the smaller light to rule the night. He also made the stars. God put all these in the sky to shine on the earth. They are to rule over the day and over the night. He put them there to separate the light from the darkness. God saw that all these things were good. Evening passed, and morning came. This was the fourth day. Then God said, "Let the water be filled with living things, and let birds fly in the air above the earth." So God created the large sea animals. He created every living thing that moves in the sea. The sea is filled with these living things. Each one produces more of its own kind. God also made every bird that flies. He saw that this was good. God blessed them and said, "Have many young ones and grow in number. Fill the water of the seas and let the birds grow in number on the earth." Evening passed and morning came. This was the fifth day. Then God said, "Let the earth be filled with animals, and let each produce more of its own kind. Let there be tame animals and small crawling animals and wild animals." So God made the wild animals, the tame animals, and all the smaller crawling animals to produce more of their own kind. And God saw that this was good. Then God said, "Let us make human beings in our image and likeness, and let them rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky. Let them rule over the tame animals, over all the earth, and over all the small crawling animals on the earth." So God created human beings in his image. In the image of God he created them. He created them male and female. God blessed them and said, "Have many children and grow in number. Fill the earth and be its master. Rule over the fish in the sea and over the birds in the sky. Rule over every living thing that moves on the earth." God said, "Look, I have given you all the plants that have grain for seeds, and I have given you all the trees whose fruits have seeds in them. They will be food for you. I have given all the green plants to all the animals to eat. They will be food for every wild animal, every bird of the air, and every small crawling animal." And it happened. God looked at everything he had made, and it was very good. Evening passed, and morning came. This was the sixth day. Genesis chapter 2 is the final day, the seventh day, the day of rest. So the sky, the earth, and all that filled them were finished. By the seventh day, God finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. God blessed the seventh day and made it a holy day. He made it holy because on that day he rested. He rested from all the work he had done in creating the world. Now, just before we continue, we must address something that I'm sure many of you will have picked up on, because you've just done this Stargazers topic, haven't you, last term? The moon is not a light source, so when it says that God created two lights, one for the day, one for the night, the moon is not a light source. It reflects the sun's light. But then you already knew that. So thinking about that second part of the learning objective, about what impression do we get of God from the story, what does it tell us about God, the story that we just heard? What words could we use to describe God? Could we say he's powerful? Powerful because he's been able to create the earth and everything in it. Is he loving because he created human beings in his image, in his likeness? So a representation of God on earth. Perhaps he's wanted to share his love with humans. Is he unfair? Is that another way of looking at it? That he made humans the masters over the earth, over all the other creatures. Is that unfair to favour humans over all else? Have a think about those things and what other words you might use to describe God. Now, for the final part of the lesson, and that learn objective to compare the creation stories in different religions and cultures, there are a few ones to be referenced here that have the creation story from those cultures. So we've got the Hindu creation story, and there's a link to the video below. Now, interestingly, in Buddhism, there is no creation story. They don't believe it's important to be thinking about such a thing. If you spend a lifetime wondering about how life began, you'd never find the true answer anyway. So Buddhists believe that it's actually a much better use of your time to living a good life in the present and not worrying about what has happened so long in the past. The creation story in Judaism, so the Jewish creation story, does have quite a lot of similarities with the Christian version. You have a look at those very briefly below. And again with the second slide there of the Jewish creation story, you can see there are some really clear, strong similarities with the Christian story. You can see in more detail about the Jewish creation story using the link below. So those 3 tasks then link to the learning objectives that we discussed. So the first one, to retell the creation story in Genesis. Can you summarise the creation story in Genesis chapters 1 and 2? You could write a short summary, or you could create a storyboard similar to the one we looked at earlier in the lesson. And secondly, discuss how God is presented. So we briefly touched on that. In what ways would you describe God? What impression do you get of God in the story of Genesis and the first 2 chapters of Genesis? You could design a mind map, a spider diagram, or a word cloud. You can there's quite a lot of software you can use to create a word cloud, like Mentimeter. And finally, to compare the creation stories of different religions and cultures. So we mentioned the Hindu and Jewish stories. There are also other ones you could research and look up, like the Egyptian creation story, the Maori creation story as well, and the Mayans. So there's lots of cultures have different creation stories. So you could look up some other ones of your own, do a bit of research, and then you could create a table with similarities, differences, or even a Venn diagram for the different stories you've considered. Now, the resources will be available via Teams as usual, and then you can record your work either digitally or on paper, and then this can be uploaded via Teams or email. And finally, you can use what you've researched or what you've worked on, and then think about that key question that we considered at the start of the lesson. What do Christians believe about God the Creator? And that's it for today. We'll see you with another RE lesson next week. Thanks.